Is there such thing as a unifying perspective or reality? And where is that reality at in terms of its evolution? Where is the human story today? How do we find ourselves?
Let's just say there's a spectrum of ways of looking at the world, from the romantic to the realist. So I'll sketch these archetypes. The realist believes that any emotions or even thoughts or narratives they have about the world are purely interior. They're like chemicals in your head. There's a certain embrace of Darwinian nihilism. You are a speck of dust on a speck of dust floating in infinite space and time. You evolved from like single cell organisms to monkeys to humans, and like your parents had sex and here you are. It's a very and you're gonna die someday. And then, your feelings about and thoughts about American politics in the year 2020, 2021 are entirely subjective. The fact that other people agree or disagree with you is sort of moot, and there's a kind of structural determinism in all of this. Things are going to play out in an almost computational fashion. If you had the mind of an AI and you could abstract out enough, you would just sort of see that there are all these large impersonal forces, class forces, technological forces, memes that are just playing out like viruses over time, and you are kind of a particle in that story. You're like a blip in that story. And so the realist, there's an emotional deflation that comes from that, because you realize the meaninglessness of everything. But then there's also an emotional release, because if meaning is ultimately arbitrary, then just tell yourself whatever narrative is adaptive to you and whatever narrative works for you. So if you're experiencing some kind of intellectual pain or emotional pain, just drop it and replace it with a better story. And there's less of a question about what's true. The romantic has a very different way of looking at the world. If the romantic runs into someone on the street, the romantic will interpret it as a sign. I was meant to run into you. There's synchronicity, there's serendipity, there's some aspect of destiny or fate. If the romantic has thought or emotion, he'll wonder whether it's Jiminy Cricket in his head or the muse, or they're being led by a spirit or guided to do something. The romantic has this compass that he or she is using to make decisions, and they're using their gut to make these decisions, and they're very oriented towards this idea that truth is objective and exists in the world and exists between people and isn't just in my head. It's not just a purely Cartesian thing that is in my head.